again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. I have two pairs of opening quotes for our sermon this morning. One is from Micah 6:8, from the Hebrew prophet Micah in the Hebrew scriptures. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? Words I return to and again as speaking to the things that I think call us to a moral life. And Aldous Huxley: it is a bit embarrassing to have been concerned with the human problem all one's life and find at the end that one has no more to offer by way of advice than try to be a little kinder. You know, I think it's honest to say that it's been a rough year for a lot of us, maybe all of us, safe to say, I think. And I was very tempted to call this sermon, just to call it Breathe, and to have us quietly sit together for the next 20 minutes. And it's probably been the roughest year I can think of in my nearly 50 years of life. And not necessarily because of anything personal. My personal life has been fine. My job is good. My family is good friendships, enjoying my home. But this year has been rough not because of anything going on in my own personal life, but because of what's happening to all of us, what we're all experiencing and together. For those of you who are on social media, you probably noticed the preponderance of memes directed at 2020, often with an exuberance of cussing. And one of my favorites, non-cussing memes, I saw this past Thursday, and it said with excitement, "Oh, it's Friday tomorrow." And then Friday the 13th. And then in 2020. And it just brought home the fear and trembling that this year has brought forth for so many of us. But beyond the jokes, I've also noticed a special kind of encouragement of late, which I hadn't seen before, where people are doing things that are often gently mocked, that are now being praised as self-care. For me, it was putting up Christmas lights before Thanksgiving. Often viewed with distaste, this year I see people saying, "Do what makes you happy." And thank you, I'm going to do that too. Because we need the light and the food and the kindness. Because 2020 has been a rough year and we're feeling it together. This year has been a year of racism and anti-racism work. It's almost a year exactly ago when I was arrested for protesting white supremacists in our local farmers market. And some of you have heard that story and remember that story. But on a more national scale, it was only this past May, less than 6 months ago, when George Floyd was suffocated by Minneapolis police, a death that set off widespread national protests against police violence and racism. Feels like a lifetime ago, honestly. I was shocked when I looked it up to find it was only 6 months ago. The hunting down of Ahmaud Arbery as he was jogging by self-appointed vigilantes, that happened last February, although the news didn't cover it widely until April. Breonna Taylor was shot to death by police in her own home in nearby Louisville in March. We've also seen the continued rise of white supremacist and white nationalist groups through rallies, protests, and acts of terror. Of course, this year has also been dominated by one of the most impactful events in most of our lifetimes, the coronavirus pandemic. To date, more than 11 million Americans have gotten the disease and 244,000 have died from it as of the last count that I was able to come across. About 1/5 of the world's total numbers here in the United States. We smashed the record for new cases in a day this past Friday with 181,196 people testing positive for the disease in one single day. And we're starting to see daily deaths reach numbers we haven't seen since July. Tragically, COVID-19 has also had a racial component where it has killed one out of every 1,000 Black people. And that's not a typo. 1 out of every 1,000 Black people has died from COVID in the United States. And the number is also almost the same for Indigenous people. 1 out of 1,000 Indigenous people also have died from COVID. The disease has touched all of our lives, as I'm sure we all know someone who's had it or even had it ourselves. And many of us, maybe even all of us, know people who have died from it. The disease, of course, has affected us economically, causing a nationwide recession and massive unemployment. Many small businesses, including local restaurants and entertainment venues, have closed. Unemployment peaked at 14.7% in April, numbers we have never seen since we began collecting unemployment data going back to 1948. And as often the case, these kinds of things hit people in poverty the hardest. And of course, there's the social impact of the disease, the loss of in-person community, the loss of human connection, touch, intimacy, the ability to go out to eat, to have a gathering or even a party in our homes, the loss of coming together in person on Sundays for church. Hell, yesterday I was wondering whether potlucks would be something that would survive this event. The disease has also been a thief of time. I haven't seen my parents in person for almost a year, both of whom are in their 70s. A planned trip for my niece's 4th birthday in Oregon was also canceled. The 4th of July with my family didn't happen. Thanksgiving together won't happen. Christmas together won't happen. And to add to these two major events, the racist challenges that we've dealt with and COVID, it's also been a presidential election year to add to all that, and not just any presidential election, arguably the most important presidential election going back to maybe 1932 when we elected FDR during the Depression. An election year when a president who lies like you and I breathe, who actively stokes racial resentment and hatred, who embodies the Dunning-Kruger effect in which a person with limited skills believes themselves to be highly competent, who cheats on his taxes, allegedly, who rapidly expanded the influence and power of the wealthy and the power hungry, and who routinely engages in authoritarian rhetoric and practice, that this person was somehow considered a viable candidate to lead this country for another 4 years by nearly half the American population. And while the American people as a whole chose not to repeat the mistake of 2016, the president is still claiming the opposite, gaslighting the nation that somehow this country couldn't possibly have rejected him without massive fraud, of course, for which there is no evidence in the slightest. And here we are with a pandemic setting records as it freely races through our country, and a president that refuses to let the next president prepare to take over, despite there being only a little bit more than 2 months to do so. So yeah, it's been a rough year. That's a lot all by itself. and it's a year of collective trauma. And I mean that literally. These global and national struggles are most definitely also quite personal. And I imagine when we emerge from some of these struggles, a national diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder will set in if it hasn't already. And that is simply to say, and to acknowledge for all of us is that we've been hurt by this, is that this has been painful, this has been harmful, we've been hurt, and we shouldn't pretend otherwise, that we have collectively been wounded by what's happened for us in this last year. Outside of anything that the virus may have done to us physically or the recession has done to us economically, this has been a time of injury, of emotional injury. And with any experience of trauma, it will take time and attention to heal. So I'm saying this to you, if I can claim the role of pastor here for a moment, you need to take care of yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Be patient with yourself. Be forgiving with yourself. And you and I, we together need to do the same for others. Because we're going through this traumatic experience too. I've been noticing that tenderness come out in people, that like extra level of tenderness, that permission and encouragement to be a bit gentler with ourselves. The Christmas lights is an example that I mentioned, where people were actively praising my early putting up of lights rather than saying, what, it's the wrong time of year. And I've also noticed that people have been more on edge. Maybe you've noticed that too. And I've noticed that I've been more on edge, and maybe you've noticed that in yourselves as well. And I've tried to catch myself from responding with that edge, remind myself to be patient and forgiving, and to recognize that all of us are struggling with things, and that other people's crankiness might need some compassion just as my own does. That's not always easy to remember, but it's become important to me to try to remember. There are some words that I've been hanging on to, words from the Lord of the Rings. When the Hobbit Frodo, placed into the circumstances of a horribly difficult task, speaks to Gandalf the Grey, a wizard, about his struggles, that he speaks to him about his struggles, about what's going on. And Frodo says, I wish it need not have happened in my time. I wish it need not have happened in my time. And that's a wish I think many of us speak forth into this time. I wish it need not have happened in my time. And Gandalf the wizard, the gray, the wise one, responded, so do I. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And that is our task. We cannot wish away the times in which we live, but we do have the power to decide what to do with the time that has been given to us. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. Shalom, amen, and blessed be.